everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Social Zee Franchise Happy Hour. I'm the host, Calvin Smith, coming from Destin, Florida. A little later in the day today, so it's not sunshine and palm trees right now, but we've got two amazing entrepreneurs and much smarter gentlemen than myself, Jerry and Dylan, joining us this evening. Jerry and Dylan, welcome.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Calvin.
Yeah. So we'll get the conversation going here as usual, but for everyone who doesn't know who you gentlemen are, Jerry, can you kind of just give a quick intro of who you are and what your relation to the franchise space is?
Jerry Akers. I own 36 Great Clips franchises across Iowa and Nebraska. Been doing it about 17 years. I'm the regional developer for the Joint Chiropractic with Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. I've got one clinic open in eastern Iowa. We're opening two more in the next 2 months, and I've got franchisees in the other areas that are working on real estate right now. So we'll be opening about 12 to 15 of them next year in the 3 states.
That's a lot, Jerry. makes me feel like I need more to do. That's great. That's great. Dylan, you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, Jerry, after that intro, I don't know if I want to introduce myself. No, I'm just kidding. I'm Dylan Ritter. Actually worked for CertaPro Painters franchise system under previous owners for about 5 years in sales, and recently this year in April purchased the franchise. Saw a lot of opportunity and growth. I was a part of that success in the last 5 years and wanted to keep that trend going, and ultimately discovered that my new passion is to create new opportunity for people like myself and promote within. I love the support with the franchise system. I think it's awesome if people care about what they do and follow the steps that are proven.
And Dylan, before you jumped on, I was telling Jerry, you're a little humble there, but at a young age, you have the largest purchase as of that date of a CertaPro painting franchise, right?
That is correct. I don't know if I should be proud of it or what, but it's true, Calvin.
Well, Dylan, I'll tell you, from my standpoint, it took me 25 years of studying franchising before I took the leap. So I'm hats off to you for jumping in as early as you did, because you're going to have a lot more years to explore that and grow and provide opportunities than I am.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more, and I appreciate that.
Jerry, what you mentioned the 25 years of studying it. What did you do before you got into this business?
Yeah, well, as I said, we've spent some time in Little Rock, and I was a turnaround guy, so I'd get hired by mechanical contracting companies, large commercial ones, to come in and analyze what they were doing right and wrong and improve them. And ultimately, within a couple of years, one of the competitors would approach me to do the same thing. So I ended up spending about 20-odd years, 27 years, I think, in that space, moving around the country, working 2 to 4 years for different companies, improving them, but wanted to own my own gig. And so early on, in my probably 26, 27 years old, I started studying franchising, picked out some likely candidates to buy, and it just didn't happen. Didn't have enough money at the time, didn't have a lot of background in it, those kinds of things. There's a lot of excuses. But then got in, as I traveled the country, started buying into some other businesses. And finally, as luck would have it, we were approached to buy an existing Great Clips. And 17 years later, we own 36 across 2 states. So, I mean, it was a process. And I think a lot of franchisees go through something very similar to that.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned being young and not necessarily having the money or maybe the experience and the financials and things like that. I don't know about you, Dylan, but one of the things that is, interesting here in Jerry's story is, these multiple acquisitions, right? Like to me, it's kind of a novelty, just kind of thinking about how can I possibly buy 6 locations of a business, right? Dylan, you went through the SBA ringer pretty extensively, right, to buy your location. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And, what do you think about doing that 6 times over?
I was thinking about that the other day, Calvin. I'd say going through that was one of the hardest processes I ever went through. but one of the greatest experiences I've ever had to go through. I feel like I learned more in 6 months than I have in the last 6 years. Just from looking at a business from all different levels, and it is a great experience. As far as doing it again, I absolutely want to do it again. And I would encourage anyone to do the same. Looking back, I know I would want to do some things differently, but I'd also like to do some of the same things. But I think it'd be a little bit easier doing it again. So,
Dylan, I'll tell you from my experience, I think we're on our 8th or 9th acquisition right now, and it gets way easier. Trust me. In fact, it gets almost too easy towards the end because you've done it so many times that, you don't spend nearly as much time putting it together and considering everything. You pick, there's about 3 or 4 things you look for when you're looking at that opportunity. And if you hit on those boxes, if you check those boxes, you go, let's do it.
right.
I mean, it does get easier. So I would suggest you take a look at doing some more in the future to get the opportunity.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I think for anyone that has not been through that process before, it's kind of a safety net for the bank giving a loan. If people are willing to go through that kind of work to get a business, you probably safe bet they're going to treat that business the same. And that's how I felt when I went through that process. It was a good test for me to make sure, hey, I'm all in. I want to do this, When I was going through this process, I kind of got to the point, I've always looked at it from a salesman's kind of eyes, and I still do in a lot of ways, but doing something as simple as a break-even analysis, you quickly discover, particularly in the franchise world, it's just math. You're going to have X amount of leads, You're going to have X amount of success with those leads. And simply put, the more leads you acquire, the more revenue you get. It turned quickly into a math formula for me. Once if you trust the business and its historical success.
Yeah, and then the other side of that math equation is the cost side, where you take a look at where money's being spent currently, and if there's some things you can do there to leverage what you've got. So those are the things you do as you acquire things. You can look at all of the things you mentioned, and then how you can save some money along the path too.
Jerry, has all your growth been through M&As, or have you done some organic growth since you started? It's all been acquisitions? No,
it's been a mix of things. We literally, when we bought it, we only wanted one, and it was going to be to supplement retirement. You know how that goes. And I'm wired the way that I am. So I immediately came in and started analyzing opportunities, and saw, by retraining the staff and doing some fairly minor cosmetic type upgrades and then remarketing it, we could double the volume in a short period of time. And we literally doubled revenue in 14 months or something like that.
Jerry, out of all the salons you have, I guess a question I would have for someone like me that is looking to get more businesses in the near future, and how do you do a drill down, or do you even do a drill down with all of your businesses? Do you look at it from an overall performance, and as long as you're hitting X, you're still in growth mode, or do you kind of get down and look at each individual business on its individual success?
We drill down primarily at the salon level, below that level if we need to. And then if each of the salons is doing well, we know that the top end will work itself out. So, and we get those numbers, typically we look at them monthly. We can drill down lower, Dylan, but most of the time we look at them monthly unless there's a problem. So how about you? I want to know more about your operation and how you track it. I know, the ownership of it for you might be a little new yet, but you obviously have a really good grasp of it from the conversation we've already had.
We have a very good system that we can drill down. I mean, very detailed on where you might be performing really well or really bad. I look at those, I have a routine every morning when I wake up. I do the same thing and look at the numbers. And again, I think I'm in I have a unique perspective on it because I've see it through the lens of, a crew member, a salesperson, a sales manager, and then the owner. I kind of understand what things to really focus on and what, sometimes you can get caught up in it.
Right.
But I focus on the bigger picture and just kept my mind open to things that I may not be super knowledgeable on, and it's paid off,
Dylan, one of the things you mentioned to me in a recent conversation was, you were looking at maybe buying some of your neighbors out in the Ritter Pro brand and kind of growing that way. What would be an interesting perspective from Jerry, since he's been through it a few times, is when did you know, or when do you know that, hey, now's the time to do it, based on your current business, or is it more about the future opportunity and you kind of look at them as separate deals?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I think many franchisees miss those opportunities because, to be honest, they overthink it. If you're running a decent organization right now, and you've got a grasp of the numbers, and I always tell people, don't grow until you've got great advisors. And generally what I mean is not only a mentor, but I mean a great accountant, a great attorney, a great banker, because those are the trifecta. If you don't have all three of those, you're missing something. But when you get to the point where you understand your business, you got a good grasp of it, and you've got those advisors, I think it's right time to start looking around. Most of our acquisitions came because once we made the decision to continue to grow, basically I identified people within a reasonable, driving distance, similar to what I think Dylan has done, that, in my case, they were probably going to retire before long, or they were tired of the business, or they had other opportunities, something like that. And I just developed a relationship with them and said something like, which is going on right now with the current acquisition: I don't want you to ever retire, but when you do, I would love to be the first call that you make to, perhaps buy your operation out. And you can tailor that any way you want to, depending on the situation. But that way, and then I had reoccurring conversations with them. And one of you brought up the bar conversation. We had a lot of bar conversations with these guys over the years, and I never forget, one of them called me out of the blue one night and said, I'm looking at this new location, and it's not been built yet, but it'll be built over the next couple of years. I'm not signing a lease unless you approve it, because I know you're going to buy me out in a couple of years and you're going to own it. So when you develop those relationships, it's like dominoes toppling, and if you've got the advisors set up that you're going to continue to grow, so one of them, one of those dominoes falls over, you're prepared to go in and, negotiate a deal, look at the books and negotiate a deal. And then you've got people lined up to loan you money and help you with the buyout paperwork, and be prepared to take over some of the accounting stuff. So, Dylan, it's not rocket science. I'm a farm boy from Iowa. I just create relationships and look at some numbers and make sure that my advisors like it, and we forge on,
Jerry, it sounds like one of the things that you did very early on and did very well was you were a business owner, not, an operator, right? You weren't necessarily in the weeds doing the work and, getting in the muddle with the day-to-day that kept you from seeing the high-level strategy picture. And, from talking with Dylan through the years, that's certainly where I struggle at a lot of times is, I get too focused on the minutia of trying to get this one location perfect or this one thing perfect, that I don't take a step back and really steer the ship the way it should go. I'm too busy in the oiler room or whatever you call it, trying to keep the ship moving versus steering it in the right direction. Dylan, after your past 7 months or so, where do you think you're at in that scheme of things?
Usually I talk negatively about myself, but I'm going to pat myself on the back here. I've been more involved than I ever have, but in a much different way. I think my experience that just came naturally, doing it for 5 years, and 5 years is not that long a time, but, one could argue that buying a business in 5 years is very short time. So I felt like I learned a lot because I wanted to. I'm very confident in this business model. and really, I'm just a support system and cheerleader for these employees, and they know that I've been, in a lot of different seats. So there's a lot of buy-in, and at the end of the day, we believe in it. And I don't know, I look at it pretty simple in that regard. I really do. If someone sees a business owner going to, check in on a crew and help them get ladders off a truck, that's sometimes worth more than sending an email and saying this is where your metrics are at. Good job. So it's paid off well for us so far. It's been really rewarding too. Quite frankly, I really enjoy doing that. It does something for me that I just really enjoy. And to take it one step further, I would even say that it has helped with, I think coming in to this business naturally, the team challenged me. Is Dylan equipped to be an owner? And I enjoy that process. Me taking the time to understand each person's position on what they do and dive in and pick the ladder up and, write thank you notes, everything in between. At that point, every single team member that we have will take some feedback, and it's natural. It's not malicious. They trust you. It's really helped a lot with coaching.
Yeah, you've earned the right then at that point in time. And ours is a little different because of, where our people have to be licensed and those kinds of things. So our tactic has always been, you're great at cutting hair and delivering the customer service experience and talking about, hair products and those kinds of things. You've been trained to do it. You're licensed to do it. You're phenomenal at it. You may not be as good at business as I am because I've been doing it a long time. And so the deal I have with you is I won't interfere in your part of it. You don't interfere in my part. And because we team together, we're going to have a phenomenal experience. You're going to do well. I'm going to do well. And it's going to be good for everybody. And that's worked out really well for us over the years. The staff continue to talk about how we're there to support them, but we don't get in their way. We don't try and tell them how to do their job. I have coached them on customer service and some of those kinds of things, but I stay out of that stuff and I just deal with my part of it, and both of us are happier. Trust me.
Dylan, one of the things I think would be interesting to have a conversation with Jerry about, especially with you being a new owner is, Jerry, what are the things when you started, and obviously you had a great career, before you dove into it, where Dylan's a little bit younger. What were the things when you started that you quickly realized, hey, I'm not good at this as a business owner, and hey, these are things where I have shortfalls. And you mentioned building a team earlier, but what are the things that you did to kind of supplement that or get better at it to be as successful as you are now?
It's a great question. And if you ask my wife or daughters, they would have a long list of things I'm not very good at. So I'll take the lead on this one. Well, I'm a big picture guy. I'm a global perspective guy. If they're not good, we'll boil down the details, but I stay away from it. So I don't do that. And I hate technology, as you can tell from the call today. I've got to be led through it, or I hand it to my daughters and they figure it out. So I identified some areas that I'm not good at. My family, who gradually came into the business, were either already good at some of those, or it became their job to become good at those. You cannot treat your family as though they're an employee, and you have to shut things off and go to Thanksgiving dinner and not talk about business. And that's hard for a lot of people. So we came up with the phrase, stay in your lane. And we identified what everybody's lane was. And in that lane, you are the king or queen. You may take whatever changes you're thinking about doing to a vote of the family committee. I'm not going to give you my 2 cents on it. We're going to bow out and let them do that. So I think as a leader of an organization that gets pretty large, especially if it's family owned, but even if you just have really good team members that do things, you got to give them the opportunity to fail and learn from their failures like we do, and just let it go. So
absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Jerry. Dylan, what are your thoughts? What have you learned? You were almost God's gift to residential sales in CertaPro, right? I mean, you the greatest one at that, the brand is scene. What are you seeing now that you're 7, 8 months in that you're like, hey, maybe I'm not great at this? What are those things that are popping out early on?
Yeah. What Jerry just said is, obviously it's going to be spot on. He's got the experience, but I've experienced that myself. And I think it was probably 2 or 3 months in, I tried to do things I knew I couldn't do. And, we just didn't communicate that I didn't want to do that. And I wasn't good at it. There's a couple of instances where I would look at an employee and go, look, I'm just going to be honest with you. This isn't my strong area. I need help. And we joke now because I'll still try to do my personality is I'm going to try to do it no matter what. Now they say, Dylan, why are you trying to do that? Like you don't need to go there, So that's kind of the relationship we have now. I couldn't agree more. I don't like details like Jerry. It's funny when someone tries to come in and sell like a magazine or something. They'll go through why the magazine, it feels good, it looks good, this and that. And I'm like, what's the numbers? It should be a 5-minute conversation. That's my strong area. So I've learned to stick to that because I tend to make bad decisions when I go outside of my lane. It's funny when people ask me what, especially after this buying the business, me and my wife will meet someone or be at dinner, whatever, just casual conversation. And what do you do? Oh, what do you do? And they'll say, well, where'd you graduate? And I'll just take a minute. And I'll go, well, I went to MTSU. And then they go, okay, well, what was your major? I laugh at it now. I used to feel embarrassed by it. But now I like talking about it because it's a cool story, I think. I say I majored in dropping out. I don't like, it goes back to that whole detail thing. Stick to what you're good at and do it well. Be confident in it. And no one ever told me that. It happened.
Yeah. And I've got a little bit of a similar story. I couldn't decide what I want to be when I grew up. So I went to college for 1-degree path. And after a couple of years, wasn't happy with where it was going. So I dropped out and then discovered real quickly I didn't want to pour concrete the rest of my life or put roofs up in Iowa in the wintertime. So, I started going to school part-time to try and finish up, changed my degree path about 4 times. Went to schools all over the country, literally University of Arkansas at Little Rock and SMU, as well as a couple in Iowa. And at the end of the day, I ended up with enough credits to have 2 majors and a minor and ended up with none because I missed 2 core classes. And, I've tried to go back and talk to the university to see if I could get those 2 core classes. And, of course, some of my original classes don't even count now, so they want me to take more. And I go, dude, I run a multi-million-dollar company. That degree isn't going to do me a darn bit of good anymore. Not sure how much good it did for me to start with. But if we can't negotiate something here, then I'm not going to send you any more money, But the fact is, you and I learned a lot through that experience because, again, failing at something teaches you a lot. And I don't look at the fact that I didn't graduate, and you already expressed it. You don't look at it that way either as a failure because I learned a lot while I was there. I learned a lot more because I hadn't followed through on it and could have maybe saved myself some pain along the way. And I think I did okay when the dust settled. So I don't think you really need to always have the degree to go with it. You can find experience elsewhere.
With that in mind, how did that translate to your kids?
Well, we want our kids to go to college, but we were very clear with them early on that it was their life and they needed to do what they wanted to do because I wanted them to find their own way similar to what I did. So our daughters did really well with their education. I would think that probably they would argue they don't use much of that anymore. They've learned far more from other resources, but, it was a checking the box type thing, if nothing else.
Have you and Scout had a conversation about the business and what role that's going to play with your kids and when you're going to have kids? Because now you've got this big big, monster you've got to take care of? Where are you guys at on that front?
Yeah, our we done talked about that. Our next kid is going to be another business. We're probably 8-10 years out from having a kid. She's so driven, just like I am. She's really got a really good, outlook on life. She's got the details part, but she's also got the big picture. It's really cool. When I think about CertaPro or any other business that we might, be a part of in the future, I've always felt I wanted to be a business owner, and it really wasn't the money. That's just a nice benefit of it. But how cool is it to sit here and say you can promote from within? I just hired a 23-year-old son of a painter that has been painting with us for 15 years, and his son's working for us in a office setting. That was a huge opportunity and a cool story to share with all the crew members, and that's what it's all about. And if my kids want that, absolutely. But I'd say going through my experience with schooling and all that, I'll be careful on, persuading or this or that. It's really figure out what people want and what they're good at. I think that's most important.
Well, yeah, like I mentioned with my kids, they've learned far more from peers and from industry-specific education and some of those things. And I think you could layer a few college classes in whatever their area of expertise on without necessarily going all the way to a degree, and get all the other information you need from somewhere else. You and I have done pretty well for ourselves, Dylan. So I think we're poster children for, just hard work and, being driven and having some resources that you are willing to put at risk to get where you're trying to go and so on. So,
Jerry, it's, the hardest part. We talked about going through that whole SBA process. I'm not worried about that at all. I'm worried about agreeing with my wife on what we want to do next. That's going to be the thing. We were talking about opening up some, like a cheese and wine shop, just something fun, on the side. And what if we franchised it? And we got to thinking and took some parking lot ideas and put them down. And it's fun. It's exciting,
Yeah, when you're partnering with your wife, there's a lot of dynamics that go on there, and so you need to be in agreement, especially if you're going to open something yourself. What I ended up doing when I opened the joint, I told my wife, you're happy where you're at, doing great clips. You like working in that zone. I'll do this one by myself. You're still going to get a lot of the money, but just let me do it by myself. And then found a right-hand man that would take on most of the responsibility. It was a really good way for me to continue to grow and expand because she's comfortable where she's at. She's at the mothership and she's getting enough money out of it. And there's a great future there and so on. She's got a little more risk aversion than I do. So she's happy where she's at. She agreed to let me do this. Isn't it funny when we tell somebody our wife agreed to let us do something, but that's the way husbands and wives should work, I guess. So, she agreed to let me go off on my journey, and now I'm not joking, I've probably got 20 other opportunities I'm working on right now, basically just spinning off the different things I'm doing, finding a smart guy to run it.
Yeah, I think we're in the much, much early stages of that, but I could see how it could unfold that way for us.
I see some great things in your future, Dylan, doing this, so I'm in your corner already, and I just barely met you. So first thing I can say is if you ever want to talk further, reach out to me because we can talk forever about this. And, I like helping other franchisees, and every time I help another franchisee, right, they ask a question that gets my juices going, and I come up with a solution to something I didn't even know was a problem. Really, so it ends up being a sharing thing, even if it didn't start out that way.
Last couple of questions here, Dylan, for you. If someone happens to listen to this and they're about to either buy an existing business or start a new franchise, obviously you just went through this, they're having some doubts, they're questioning, as Jerry said, they're overanalyzing everything, right, as we tend to do. What would you say or give advice to someone in that position?
I would say don't focus on really the market. Don't focus on these little details here and there. Is it something you want to do? Are you willing to put forth the effort? And can you clearly express your confidence in growing a company and growing this brand and legacy? If you care about those things, I don't see failure. That's
awesome. That's great input, Dylan. And Jerry, a question for you is, if someone is in my position or Dylan's position, and we have a successful business, we're making a good living, and we're looking at growing, but we're scared that we may, take on too much, or we may sacrifice, the comforts and things that we have. What would be your advice to them on whether or not to make the decision to keep pushing that envelope and keep expanding to, hopefully one day be where you are?
Yeah. So if you've got it locked in, if you're doing well with what you've got, you know what it takes to be successful already. And, it becomes, in my opinion, very easy to copy that. Once you got the recipe and you're comfortable in that zone, then I would continue to expand, and even diversifying across different brands and even completely different sections of the industry is certainly possible, because the franchising model is very similar up to about the 80th percentile. And then you got the 20th that is, or the 20% that is, very specific for that one. So, once you learn the magic of that first one, I think it's exceptionally easy to continue to grow and expand beyond that.
Awesome. That's great advice, Jerry. Jerry and Dylan, it's been a pleasure. We appreciate your time and input and wisdom. Hopefully some people got something out of this. And for those that took the time to listen to this last 48 minutes and 21 seconds, hopefully you got something out of it as well. And we hope you join us next time on the Social Zee Franchise Happy Hour. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. It was a blast.